gouache painting today. Let me show you guys the reference picture for today. I took it in, I think it was like September, so it's late summertime, but something about it feels kind of wintry. I think it's the cool colors. It's like a very cool cast to the image, and then maybe because it's like evergreen trees or something, I don't know. But it's kind of interesting that way. But I like the colors in it, so that's the plan. Okay, well, let me make room for this one then. Yay, I'm excited. It's a little puffy because it's a pretty new book, and there's a lot of pages under here, so it's puffing up a little bit, but I think it'll be okay. I think I'm gonna do mostly the top-down view today. We'll see how that goes. It seems to be like the more requested view as far as being able to see the color mixing and stuff. I'm just getting myself like in the mindset here. We're gonna do a gradient in the sky. It's a slight gradient. We're gonna start with like a darker blue, move down to like a more light, like a lighter cyan blue. We're gonna let that dry, or I'll just use the hairdryer, and then we're gonna paint on top. So that is the plan. That is the plan. So I think for the blues that I'm gonna use, I have a few options. I have an aqua blue I really like. I don't know if that's gonna be quite dark enough. I don't think so. So I'm gonna put also some ultramarine deep on the palette here. Cobalt turquoise light. I like this color. All right, so my idea is I'm gonna mix up maybe 2 different blues and then have them like ready to go. Then we're gonna wet the paper, and then we're gonna do blend gradient wash. All right, here we go. I'm gonna mix up some colors here. So down here I have white and the cobalt turquoise. So I want to mix up that really light cyan color that's going to come in at the bottom. So you guys can see the difference between these blues. We've got like a cool, like more greenish blue, and then this warmer blue here. I'm going to wet the paper. And I have like a lot of fuzzies on my page here. Anyway, it's still wet, but we just want it to sink in a little bit. So, okay, here we go. So I'm gonna start a little bit low on the page. This is definitely more transparent than I thought, but I think it'll work. Mix this a little bit more thoroughly. All right, here we go. All right, a bit streaky. All right, so what's nice to do sometimes is, I think I have to show this from the side, is kind of do these sort of motions with a really soft brush. So it's like very, very lightly. There's a little bristle in here. I'm like, maybe I should just let it dry in there because I don't want to remove all the... Okay, I'm just gonna let it dry and then take it out. So let me show you guys also, I'm gonna clean this brush. I really like almost only use this brush for this situation. So the top of the bristles, you can see they're permanently stained. Like I just rinsed it off. But yeah, I usually just use this for doing that. Okay, so what I was gonna show real quick, this Bob Ross tip is what he said was to take another brush, like a dry, clean brush, and to try to, like, you could try to lift up the bristle by kind of swiping very, very lightly, like not really going hard against the painting, but just kind of very, very lightly grazing in the direction, like against the bristle, so you can kind of lift it up. I'm just afraid I'm gonna actually lift up paint, but yeah, it does seem to be, oh, I got it. Oh, but look what it did. The water tension, like, yeah, I got the other one too, but now this is like a permanent mark there. So that's okay, we'll just put like foliage in front of it. No problem. But I guess, yeah, I gotta be careful with these brushes, leaving those things in there. This is actually drying pretty quick, which is nice. It's not quite there yet. It's all part of the process. Traditional painting things, you know what I mean? This doesn't happen in digital painting, but that has other problems. Happy little accidents indeed. So usually when I decide what to paint next, it's a little bit of a combination of two things that I think about. I like to work back to front and also large to small. So the sky was like a very large thing in the picture and also the furthest. So it makes sense to start with the sky. Now I'm thinking, what am I gonna do next? So back to front, it becomes like one, let me show you the reference picture. It's hard for me to make that decision because I feel like these things become grouped. If you see like the tree and then the smaller tree next to it and then the foliage and then it goes down, it's like that becomes one big shape. Okay, so I think what I'm gonna do is the ground and then have the trees come up from it. I think that's the plan. And part of the reason I'm deciding this in the end is because the way I usually do trees is painting the tree trunk first and then kind of painting branches coming out. So I need to like take some time on that. So I don't think I can do like where I usually like will group things and try to make one big shape. I don't think I can really do that with the trees because it'll be too messy. So I think I can make one big shape down here and then we can like bring the trees up from that and do that a little more neatly. So this is my whole thought process. You can see it's a little messy, like back and forth thinking about things. Like I don't always have a clear path. Sometimes I do, it depends on the reference picture. Sometimes it's like really obvious what the next step is, and other times it's like, you have to just try. All right, you guys, well, I'm gonna put some colors on my palette for, you know, the lower part of the canvas. So we're gonna use this Permanent Green Deep. This is a really nice color. It's like a dark green, but it's a very cool green. It's got a lot of blue in it, which I like for shadows and things like that. So this is a very cool colored scene overall. I do like the contrast of like the warm colors in the area where the sun is hitting, but I think for the most part we're gonna have a lot of cool colors in this. So I'm just gonna put some different color greens, more like different value greens, I mean different color as well, but just have a selection here from dark to light. And then what other colors do I need to have handy? I think some browns. I'm gonna use burnt sienna and a burnt umber. And one of my favorite colors, and I use a lot in shadows, is the Spectrum Violet from Winsor & Newton. So I'm gonna put that one over here too. And we already have some white and some of this ultramarine. Keep it wet. Maybe I will add a little bit of that aqua color we used for the sky. I like this color also for in foliage where you sometimes have like reflected light off of the leaves in shadows and stuff. I like to use this cobalt turquoise. Sometimes I have to darken it a little bit, but that's a good color for something like that. Your ceramic palette is so nice. Thank you. This was made by, let me write the name in the chat for anybody who wants to check them out. Sylvan Clayworks. Gosh, I hope I'm spelling this right. Really amazing. There's I have some other pieces. This is a smaller one. Here you go. Not sponsored, just awesome work. Yeah. So talking about order of operations, we've decided we're gonna do this area first. When I paint lately with gouache, I've been painting in a more watercolor-like style. So even though I almost always do, you know, what I was talking about, big to small, back to front, there's this one little exception that can come in, and that is, like with this scene, there's a small area here where there's a lighter like sand kind of stuff coming up here. And for me, I do think it might make sense to like quickly just put in that first because it's gonna be lighter, and then everything else can come around it that is gonna be a little bit darker, just because I am sort of painting a little bit more like watercolor. So it just works better to try to go light first than if you have to, you know, it is gouache, so if you have to, you can definitely get some opaque, like thicker paint if I need to paint lighter stuff back in and layer it on top. But I kind of like the fresh look of sort of seeing through to the paper in those situations if possible. So I'm going to take some Spectrum Violet, I'm going to add it over here because I think it has a very like purple cast to the shadow. This might be maybe a little bit too much, but I really like that color, and I don't think there's anything wrong with like pushing it a little bit in that direction, sort of like a magical feeling, and I think it works well with the heather that also has that purple. And one thing that I like also is having some different hues, like having something not completely mixed. Like in the sky, I wanted it completely mixed because I wanted a clean gradient, but here I think it's actually nice if it maybe starts a little bit more lavender, fades to like a different temperature. So even bring some of this burnt sienna in. Okay, so the colors are ready. Let's just do it. You can see more watercolor, and I can actually paint this however big I want because I'm going to paint the other steps basically on top of this, the grasses and things. So we can create some little streaks here. Okay, and maybe I can just jump into the next part. Okay, so this is really warm right now and it feels very sunny, which can work for some of the areas up top, but I'm going to mix some blue. I'm going to mix a complementary color to mute it out a little bit, and then we're going to use that for down here. Hi, Tanner. And then maybe add some green. So you see what I'm saying with having some of the colors not mixed perfectly, like having them mix on the page is kind of fun. The only problem is moving quick. Sometimes it just doesn't go great. You can get some muddy colors and stuff, but I feel like, you know, if I just keep practicing with this, practicing the decision making, hopefully it'll just get better with time. It'll get easier to grab the right colors. What's the painting gonna be like? Well, I'm hoping that it's gonna have a relaxing, peaceful feeling to it. That's kind of the feeling that I get when I look at the photo. If you type !ref, R-E-F, you can see what the reference picture looks like, so that might give you some idea where it's going. I really like the cool colors. I like the contrast between the cool colors in the shadows and then the warm colors at the top of the scene where the sunlight's hitting. So I think that's going to be like focusing on that contrast is really important. So right now, like I do want to keep this cool. I feel like it's already a little too warm here, but that's okay because we're going to layer on top of that with more plants and stuff, the heather. So I'll just sort of fix it there. So we have a big mass of foliage over here. I'm gonna try to get a little bit more gouache on my brush. I've been painting very transparent, but this area needs to be fairly dark value, so I need more paint. Hey Sean, welcome. Welcome to Gouache Painting Day. Hi Keith. Hope you're doing well. So I really like how the, you know, if you work quick enough, you get all these like soft blends. Like this might be getting a little too soft here, but maybe it's cool. Maybe it works out. Again, with happy accidents, it kind of looks like wispy grasses coming up, so we'll see. The warm and cool contrast will be great. Thanks. Yeah, I hope I can I hope I can really emphasize it. So for example, up here, we've got some sunlight hitting. So that would be where I have some warm colors like this. So what I'm painting right now is really it's a base layer. So, you know, I'm trying to do as well as I can with it, but if something doesn't go quite right, it's also not a big deal because this is going to be covered. Maybe not every part of this, maybe some parts of the base layer will show through, but for the most part, everything here is going to have some more details on top of it by the end, so we're going to be able to fix how this is. So I see my base layer when I'm painting in gouache, I kind of see that as like a very blurry version of what the painting will look like. This is just what started to make sense for me. People paint in all different kinds of ways. Some people do like a more classical type of underpainting with like a burnt sienna wash and focus on values, and like there's so many different ways to do it. But right now, this is kind of what I'm enjoying doing. So we're getting up to the part where we're gonna have to get some trees coming up here soon. So I might switch to a different type of brush. Maybe just a round brush, just something that's gonna give a little bit more, I was using a round brush, but like a soft mop brush. This is a round brush that has a little bit more snap to it, so you have a little bit more control. I kind of want, while this is still wet here, to start with the tree, so this tree here, I want a little bit more to the right side. Oh gosh. Okay. That's fine. Everything's fine. We're gonna do here. Okay, sometimes better just get it over with. Alright, so this is already like so much easier for me once that one thing is done. It's like, okay, now we have the structure of the tree. I'm gonna switch brushes again to the extended point brush. I want to paint some branches, and I think this will be easier. It's not always the case. Let's see. Yeah, it's good for here. Classic Bob Ross bravery test. The tree that comes right in front of everything you've just painted. Luckily for me, it was only really the sky. You know, sometimes you see him painting and he's got like mountains and all kinds of stuff already, you know, detailed, and then you have to come with that one tree right in front. And it's just it's always scary. So I'm trying to copy the shapes that I'm seeing of the branches and to have different amounts of space between them. Some of the branches are going to be lighter color than me having the sunlight on them, and not everything has to be done in this first like go with the branches, because what's going to happen is after we paint some of the green foliage, then we're gonna have to layer some more of these in because they're gonna get covered. So it'll be like a little back and forth to get these working. But this helps now because now I know where I can put the foliage on top of these like skeleton structures for the trees. What brands and colors are you working? So at the moment I am using a pretty random mixture of Holbein and Winsor & Newton colors. Like I was saying at the beginning, I really need to narrow this down and kind of redo my standard palette, because for a while, I think for even a couple years, I had like certain colors that I was always working with. And then lately I've been experimenting, trying some different colors, and I haven't quite narrowed down a new regular palette, but instead I just have like 25 tubes of gouache on my desk. So it's not great. It's like I'm not using them all. I just kind of grab whatever I think I'm gonna need for that painting, and it's but I don't think that's ideal for me. I think it's a lot more efficient to have like a set palette and get really good at using that palette. So that's something I want to work on. But yeah, for now it's a little all over the place. I'm in a transition time. I'm also thinking about experimenting more with just painting from primary colors. So I might try doing some more of that, and then yeah, using some other random tubes as accents when it's really needed, like just having less convenience colors. Thinking could be another way to simplify things. I'm gonna grab a little practice sheet here. Sometimes I like to do this. So I'm gonna use this permanent green deep and maybe a little burnt umber. I don't know, I feel like I need to modify this color a little bit. Just looking at the photo, that feels a little bit better maybe. So the only problem I'm having right now is I feel like the mix on my palette is a little too wet. And I want to get some texture to these brush strokes. And if you have too much water, you can't really get any of these dry edges. You can't really see, hold on, let's see. Yeah, so I want some textured edges. So you can't have too much water in your paint if you want to get that. So, okay, this is better. All right, here we go, back at it. So it's just a little bit of texture. This is still overall pretty wet mix that I have here. So I'm going to be pretty conservative with these marks right now, because one thing that I want to try to avoid is I just don't want to over paint, and I want to leave some white spaces for the sky to show through. If I paint too much, it's not the end of the world, because we can mix up a blue and put those spaces back in. So I won't go too crazy, but I do want to think about leaving space. So I'm kind of taking my time a little bit. I think one thing that's really beautiful with trees and with the light shining through the branches and everything is the negative spaces, the negative shapes, the shapes of the sky, basically. In the middle, so right here on the reference picture, I really like all that space, all those shapes there, and the fact that you can see that little area right here where you can see the tree trunk on both sides. I feel like that adds so much, just having that one spot. Like, to me, that's a real focal point. So I don't want to paint that out, you know? And if I do paint it out somehow, if I get carried away, then I'll have to add it back in with some blue. Project says, when you take reference pictures, do you use a camera or your phone? I mainly use my phone, like 95% of the time. The nicest camera that I really have, other than that, is this ZV-1 that I've been using for video, and I found that I just didn't really enjoy using it for photos. For video, it's great, but for photos, I feel like it was a lot of extra work compared to how easy it is to use your phone and just have that in your pocket. It was a bit of extra work, and I just didn't feel like I was getting much more out of it. So I'm just sticking with the convenience of my phone, unless I were to get like a really nice camera that is focused on taking still shots and everything. But I would like to upgrade my phone camera sometime. So right now, my phone it's like getting a little bit old at this point. It's the OnePlus 7T is what I have. And I mean, I've been happy with it. It served me well. No complaints, but the cameras that I see these days are getting crazy. And I do think I would get a lot of use out of having a new one. Andrea says, I have proper photography gear and still shoot most reference with my phone. It's more convenient. I have to plan to bring the gear with me. Yeah, exactly. It like becomes more of a big thing. So that's interesting to hear. But I think that would be the same for me too. And it's also like sometimes you don't plan to see a cool thing. You just, you know, you don't have stuff with you and you just see something cool, you take a picture, and that's it. And the other thing, which is kind of interesting, is I've noticed that when I paint, I kind of like when my reference isn't like extremely high resolution. It was the opposite when I first got into digital painting. Oh my gosh, I wanted the biggest picture I could find to paint from, and I thought that was better. It is good to have some level of quality. I mean, if you've got like a pixelated, you know, tiny thing, that's hard, okay? But within reason, I find that for me, like having even like, you know, 1920 by 1080 size is like perfect for a reference picture, because again, with the see a blob, paint a blob, like big picture thing, it kind of simplifies it for you a little bit in a way. You can't zoom in and get so obsessed with the tiny details. You kind of, I don't know, just keeps it from getting too crazy. Well, this part, I'm just not like loving it yet, but I'm going to carry on. It just, I don't know what it is. I think it's just I haven't narrowed in on the right values yet. It's also just beginning, so the trees are looking like the before picture from the Charlie Brown Christmas episode, if you've ever seen that. But they'll get there. We just need to keep going. So what I want to do is get the perfect amount of water and paint on my brush, because I want some of these textures, these split textures, and yeah, I have too much paint globbed on. Same problem as here. I'm like having too much paint on my brush and I'm not getting the textures that I want. So let's try this. Yeah, that's much better. You guys seeing this? More wispy. So you can see the difference. I think it's gonna be more interesting. Alright, so I'm just looking at the reference and seeing where I need to add. I'm gonna switch to the lighter color soon too for the top right of these trees, and then I think we're gonna get a better read on the values. Let's try the warmer upper area. So I'm gonna use this Holbein leaf green here, which is already drying. We've got a little bit of burnt sienna, and together, this might be the right color. We want a very warm color. I like that. I think that'll work. Get a little bit more. Hopefully I have enough to get some coverage here. Okay, so. Ooh. Okay, so it's not exactly the right color now that I'm putting it right down on the page, but I think it might be nice as like to have a few brush strokes like this. It's really extra warm. Then I'll mix up another color and kind of have some variety there. Try to make some larger brush strokes. So I feel like I'm getting into details too soon, but it's kind of hard to judge because these little the details on the trees are quite small, so I'm having trouble figuring out how to group these and work large to small, which I usually like to do. I feel like I'm getting sucked into the small shapes. I'm gonna try to stay loose as much as possible. So after we get more of the highlight area in, we're going to be able to add some very small little shadows. I think that's also a very satisfying part of the painting. I mean, the reference picture, hopefully the painting, is those little shadows in here. And they make it look very 3D. Sometimes with paintings like this, with scenes like this, it feels like you have to be patient for a while until it starts, you know, you get the highlights in or the lighter values, and it starts to make more sense. So it's too late to change anything with the sky now, and I'm happy enough with it. But now that I'm trying to put a color, I want a color to pop against the sky a little bit, and I'm wondering if I should have made the sky darker. But that's very tricky. If you look at the photo, I'm pretty sure that the, even though it doesn't, here, let me show the photo real quick so we can do a little comparison together. At the top here, I think the tree is still darker than the sky. It's weird, okay. Even though it feels like, in a way, it feels lighter because the light is hitting it, but it's actually still darker than the sky. There might be some little highlights that are lighter, but overall it's darker. Tricky value situation. Also, the camera is making my work look a little bit more cyan than it seems in person. All right, while we're adding these light colors, I'm gonna go to the burnt sienna, get some of that, maybe I'm gonna add some yellow to my palette and some more white. So up here, there's highlight hitting, I think, like pine needles and leaves and random stuff on the ground here, and it's really bright. Yeah, that color was needed. And that color is going to come in here a little bit too. So that's sort of like the highlight color for the browns. So I think this brush might be a little bit too big for some of the details I want to do right now, but that is the right color. So let me get a smaller brush. Okay, so I'm gonna actually move this over a little bit because for what I'm gonna do now, I might need to rest my hand here to get a little bit more stability. So I've got this color, and then looking at the photo, and so for some of these branches, I want to add this as like a highlight on the wood part of the branch. And I think I'm gonna make it a little bit lighter because light colors tend to dry darker. It's very tricky sometimes with gouache, and I want this to still be a nice highlight. I can see it's already drying a bit darker than I expected right here. So I'll brighten that up a little bit more. So yeah, you can see this is what I mean with like the layering. So it's gonna take a while to get everything layered in here. So we've got some light coming in. I'm adding some of those highlights. I'm gonna also add shadows under there. Well, things definitely slowed down once I got to this part of the painting process with the tree. I'm kind of looking forward to getting to work on some other things in the scene soon, you know? Trying to think where else I can add a little bit more of this color before I move along while I have it on my brush. Got a little bit highlights coming through here. Getting a nice sunny look. Yay! I'm glad. So there's a tree over here on the right. It's like a different type of tree. So I'm wondering if I should take a different approach. I think I am going to use the same brush, but I'll see if I can maybe somehow indicate some different leaf shapes and stuff like that. So I'm just making some different kinds of brush strokes with this brush kind of downward. So almost like upside down from the way I was making brush strokes over here, just to kind of make it look like a different type of tree, which it is a different type of tree, but. So there's a branch coming in from the side here. I do think it has a nice framing effect. I wasn't sure if I was gonna add it or not, but I think I'm going to. I'm gonna go for it. I think you guys can't see what I'm doing. The only downside sometimes to the top-down view is sometimes you can't really see because my hand is blocking it. So I'm trying to keep these little wispy brush strokes here. Oh, thank you, Bruce. I appreciate that. That's why I've been really trying to capture the lighting, and it was kind of slow going for a bit until I finally got to add the highlights, and now it's working a little better. Oh, okay. Well, hey, thanks, Average Joe. Thanks for checking them out. And, well, if you go to any of my socials, there'll be links to the brushes there too. So if you think of it later and you just like look me up on, you know, Instagram or wherever, there should be a way to get to them that way. All right, I'm gonna start like this, I think, although I do kind of want a little bit more of an upward feeling here. All right, well, they feel a bit out of place at the moment, but I think when we add little highlights and kind of finish them off, it'll work. So this is a very dark color, but it's somewhat transparent mix. So I'm going to sort of glaze that on top here. I went a little bit lower than I meant to, but that's okay. Very sedentary during coffee time. Well, then you could definitely benefit from a mug warmer. So now I can bring some of these darker shadows onto these branches and kind of connect. So I want to connect this shape and then have it start to kind of fade up into this by starting within the shape and then bringing these little details up and away from it, so it kind of has like an interesting edge to the shape. And we'll let that stuff dry, and let's do some work down here. I don't know if it's my favorite, maybe my second favorite part of the image, because I think my favorite part is like this spot right here that I need to clean up. But my second favorite is the texture of the heather and just the shapes of it. I think it's very interesting. I'm actually tempted to draw on here. So I usually kind of freehand, but the shapes are so cool and interesting and I want to get them right. So I could just draw on top of this wash. So I really want to make sure that I get these like angular shapes. And then here there's like a cool sort of zigzag thing. Okay. It's pretty dark, so I feel like pencil lines won't be too much of a problem. Well, this will probably be a couple layers. I'm starting with this shadow here just because I really want that 3D effect to come in pretty quick. Hey Ninja! Been a while, how have you been? I've been good, thanks. Overall, some ups and downs, but overall doing well. And I hope you've been well too. All right, I'm gonna mute my green a little bit, just add some brown. And I wanna continue down here adding some little grasses. I used to paint in a little bit of a different style with my gouache. I used to paint like a lot more thick paint and more dry. And one thing that I noticed was I actually kind of liked some of my brushes that were older and kind of beat up a little bit because they made like really interesting textures with the dry gouache. Whereas like now I paint a little bit of a different style. But so for me, it was actually kind of a benefit having some older brushes. So it's like being obsessed with care for them was almost worse. Like I actually took scissors and cut a couple of my brushes to make like some weird shapes. So it's like, depending on what you're using, how you're using your tools, it can matter more or less, or even sometimes be beneficial when they get worn in a little bit. Love gouache. Kuya, do you ever paint in gouache? But I love it too. Like I like using it and I also love the look of it. Like I'm a big fan of just, yeah, artworks made in gouache, but it's really cool. And I feel like for digital painters, it's a fun medium because it has some, I don't know, it just seems to vibe with things that digital painters like. Like it's got bright colors, you can do the opaque painting and the transparent painting. It just kind of has a lot of those things that cross over even though the mediums are very different. Tried it a few times, don't have much space to paint traditionally, but I want to pick it up again when I move places. Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, I totally understand that. Before I had a space for doing traditional painting that was separate, I tried one time to do a traditional art stream and I had to like move all my stuff out of the way, like move my Cintiq, and then I was trying to paint and then move it back and I was like, this is never gonna happen again. This is not gonna happen. Like it's really hard when you don't have a space. So yeah, but that'll be great when you can do it. Foster says, an oil painting artist I follow calls his beat up brushes old warriors, uses them for excellent textures and effects. Exactly. That's so cool. Yeah, it's nice because if you still have a use for those old brushes, it's awesome. Like down the road, maybe you retire them from certain things and then they have now a different use. And I'm gonna paint it in even though it's still wet there a little bit. So I think some of what I'm painting in right now is gonna kind of blend in and be soft, but I think that's kind of cool. And then we'll add some, when it dries, we'll add some with like more precise painting. Yeah, I will post the finished one. It still needs a lot of work, but when it's done, I will post it on my Instagram. Assuming I don't ruin it, but I don't think so. That was something pretty dramatic would have to happen. I think it's going pretty well. It just has a bit more work to do. Thank you, Bab. It's good to be here. I hope you've been well. Getting some of these blues here. So this is where I like painting more transparent with gouache, is right here. I just wanted to add like a little shadow, and I feel like it looks nice with that light wash. Some cameras do have issues with that, Pavlos, but the ones I'm using here, for the amount of time I'm streaming, it really shouldn't be a problem. It really shouldn't. Checking it out, Aline done watercolor and oils. Cool. Well, I think you'll probably like gouache because, you know, skills that you would use for both of those mediums will come in handy. Gouache is just really cool because it's kind of like a combination almost, it feels like, of different types of mediums. Like it has you can water it down and use it just like watercolor if you want. And so what I usually do is I usually start out my paintings in more of a watercolor approach and do the early layers like almost just like a watercolor painting, and then as I layer it, just get, you know, and if you need to get opaque to paint a light color over a dark color, then you can do that. But there's so many different ways to use gouache. Like I've seen some artists use gouache exactly like watercolor, and they water it down a lot, and then other artists paint with it really thick and like blend the paint together, or even like on the paper and kind of paint like an alla prima style and just have like these big thick paint strokes. And then people can be in between those two. It's just like crazy. You can experiment with it and see what you like, you know. There's not like one way that you have to do it. I do think, so one thing that I see people do a lot, like a beginner issue that I see with gouache a lot, is that people use too much water in the situation where they don't want that kind of result. Like I use a lot of water pretty often, but it's like I'm doing that on purpose because I want a certain result here. What I see sometimes is people using too much water in a situation where they actually want opaque coverage. Like they actually want to be able to cover something, but they've used too much water, so it's too transparent, and then they have to layer a couple times. So I guess if you're struggling with something like that, then that's just to preempt that issue. If you're trying to layer and you're like unsatisfied with how the layering is going, if it's not working, then you might be just using too much water. And I feel like I'm getting too much water, so let me try it here. Yeah, I want these little purple, maybe a little bit more blue. Okay. So I want here these little tiny marks. In the reference, it's like little bits of dirt, little things growing, bits of grass coming through the sand. Oh, Prudence, thank you so much for hanging out. It was really nice. I hope you have a good rest of your day, good evening. Addison says, is wet on wet here a big hurdle? Do you mean, is it like hard to get into painting that way? I wonder. It might depend on the person and like what makes sense for your brain. You know what I mean? When I was first getting into gouache, I liked to paint, like I was saying earlier, a lot more dry, and I would paint a layer and then let that layer completely dry and then paint the next layer. And now I do like the effects that you get of when you have like a wet page and you can let the colors blend together a little bit. I think it's a lot of fun. As far as is it a big hurdle? I don't know. I kind of waited until I was ready, not on purpose. I wasn't like, I'm waiting till I'm ready. You know what I mean? But at the beginning, I just did something different, and then over time I got curious about that workflow and started experimenting with it, and I feel like at that time my painting skills had improved a bit, so it felt like sort of the next step to try out. And I wonder if I had first tried to paint that way when I first began with gouache, maybe it would have been really hard for me. I'm not sure. I think anything is possible if you want to do it and if you find the right learning resources. Like if that's how you want to paint and you look online, you know, even just searching on YouTube, I'm sure you can find some videos of people doing that, and you just got to try it out and keep practicing. Addison says, I think lots of water doesn't exactly match my temperament, but it looks fun. You could always try, just for playing around, you could always try some abstract stuff and just like let colors sort of blend together. It's very fun and satisfying to just even make gradients or, you know, stuff like that. Like have, like wet the sheet of paper and just kind of like put colors down, like pick a color palette, pick a few colors you like and just kind of like let them do something. Just you know, try it out. Yeah, exactly. Not everything needs to be super serious. Foster says it seems like the thin to thick layers with gouache may help it not flake off and stick better. I completely agree with that. I think when you use really, really thick paint, it's more likely to crack and flake off. Obviously, like if you're using better quality gouache, that helps too. However, there's a limit for everything. It seems like the paint adheres better adheres well in small layers. When you see the paint like actually so thick on the paper that you can kind of see the elevation of it, I can indeed see how it could be like even easily scraped off or something like that. So yeah, I think there's something to that. Bab says I do mostly digital art on Procreate, so I'm pretty unpracticed with traditional. The gradient is a good idea. Cool, yeah, just to play around and kind of get familiar with things. It's nice to get to try things and not have so much the stress of like making a mistake or something, because it's not easy to learn that way. It's more easy to learn when you can actually just play around, I think. I do a lot of that. I don't do it on stream necessarily, but I can show you guys. So I have some like random stuff that I'm just trying to practice and see like amounts of waters getting comfortable. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. You know what I mean? Doing some like Ghibli studies with grass and stuff. And they don't get finished because most of them are like, they were pretty bad at the beginning and there's just nothing's gonna come of it, and I'm just trying stuff. So yeah, I have a lot of like experiments that don't turn into anything, and it's just practice. The hardest thing for me is spending my paper, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, you're going through paper and you're not creating finished artworks that you can do anything with, but it doesn't matter. You know, that's just like what it's for, to use it. But yeah, it's like, you have to improve by trying things and making mistakes. And if I had to make every painting like perfect to post online, I think I would be having less fun, and also I wouldn't be able to learn as fast. I think you learn faster by making mistakes, and you can't make mistakes when you're not letting yourself try things because you're trying to be perfect. The values in what you learned, exactly. At least it's more forgiving than watercolor. Yes, gouache is more forgiving than watercolor. You can paint over mistakes and things to some extent. Like, so there's like what I've noticed is when I used to paint in that more like thick gouache painting style, I didn't run into this a lot, what I'm about to say. I felt like it was always easy to fix any mistake because the style I was painting in, it was just like everything was almost fully opaque. Now that I'm painting in this style where sometimes like the effects that I want are those like wet and wet or like glazed effects or these like transparent areas, sometimes if I mess something like that up, then I can paint over it and technically fix it. Like I can fix a values mistake or like a bad brush stroke or something, but it will never have that look that I was originally going for. So it's like, that part I still get bummed out about sometimes when I make mistakes, even though it's like technically I can fix it, but it'll never have that freshness that I was going for. So that's like a thing. But that said, you can still fix it. You can still paint over and make it into something, even if it wasn't your original perfect thing that you had in mind. Foster says, I have that don't waste supplies problem too, but I really should practice more. It can be hard, you know? I mean, a lot of these art supplies are expensive, and, you know, sometimes you get something nice and you feel like you have to save it for the most epic painting ever and stuff, but it is important to use it. I try to remind myself that always. Never heard of people washing good quality paper and reusing it. Or I've heard of people washing good quality paper and reusing it, never tried it though. Whew, I have never tried that with that intention, but I did have a situation one time where a painting was such a disaster, and it was in a I'll show you guys. I've showed this on stream before, I think. So in this old book, I had been working on a painting of Elf's Castle, and it was supposed to be like, it was started out as a watercolor painting, and I messed up. Here it is on the left. So it was a watercolor painting that I messed up, and the painting got it was so bad. And you know, I didn't want to, you know, I was painting in this book, and I was, you know, pretty happy with like a lot of the paintings in here, and I just didn't want to have like such an ugly page in my book. I was like, no, don't ruin my book. So I kind of scrubbed this page like I did. I took water and I took a really big brush, and I like, I was very aggressively like just like scrubbing the paint. And then I say very aggressively, I mean much more than I would usually do on a painting, you know, but you have to consider the paper a little bit, but you know what I mean. I was like going through with the brush, and then taking like a towel and bringing it up, and then wetting it again, and taking the towel, and just removed as much of the paint as I could. And then I painted on top of it with gouache, and just kind of like covered. And it was cool because it didn't get perfectly removed. Like there was still, because some pigments are staining, so there was like a little bit of shadowy hint of what the painting had been, and it was kind of like all just messy. And so I painted on top of it, and it was kind of like a cool thing to try because it had like this blurry version of the painting underneath. And then I was like, anyway, so it got saved out of necessity. But I did end up, yeah, totally reusing that piece of paper. Thanks, you guys. Thank you, Bev, Chris, Foster. Yeah, so I guess based on that experience, I would say you could potentially wash and reuse a paper, but I don't know that it would be worth it. It's really, it's hard to get it back to the point of like a fresh start. Like in this case, I was painting the same image on top of it, but if I was gonna try to paint something different on top of that, I think I would have been fighting the original residual painting. But could be cool as an exercise, you know, like to do on purpose, knowing that it's gonna be a challenge, just to like try that out. Some people regularly paint over their old paintings. Oh, I forget, I'm following someone on Instagram who paints and then sells his paintings, and if he doesn't sell one after a certain amount of time, he just paints on it again. He just repaints it. And I think that's really cool. I'm like, I respect that. I couldn't do it. I really couldn't do it, especially because his paintings are beautiful, and it's like he'll paint over ones that are like perfectly great painting, but it's like he's like, I'm here to sell paintings. If they don't sell, I repaint it something else. And I enjoy painting, and this lets me paint more. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty awesome. But all right, let's see how that color goes. It's a bit light, but it might dry darker. It looks a little too light, but I also like variation. So if I mix this darker color and kind of like use a little bit of both and give some gradient. Helen says it was actually a therapy method I was told about once to break down your tension and unhappiness with your art. Just painting over the same piece each day and learning to play and be less precious over the result. No posting the art or showing anyone either. That sounds really cool. I like that idea. I wonder, I do think it gets harder, you know? Like, the more layers you have on there, it's gotta be really hard to actually, you know, actually do that. Never had the courage to try it though. Yeah, it sounds like a big challenge. Addison says perhaps a variation of that would be a nice compromise. Sharing a bit with close friends and family. That could be cool, especially like if you've got people that you know are very supportive, or maybe like some other artist friends that you, because a lot of times in this community we've talked about like different struggles, and we have certain struggles that we share and stuff. So it could be something like that, where you just have a small community that you feel very comfortable with, that you share, just to like sort of encourage each other and like have that like struggle together thing, because sometimes that helps when you're pushing through some kind of challenge that is really tough. But it would have to be just the perfect situation, because otherwise you don't want it to be a situation where you feel like it's competitive or that you would feel embarrassed about anything that you've done, because that's, I think, would hold you back, because the whole point is to not have that social pressure. So I think it could work as long as you're in like the perfect situation with that, and feeling comfortable. And then I think it could be great. I'm really liking the lower part of the scene now, and I feel like part of that is because I captured the colors a little bit better from the reference. I think in the upper part, the greens got really too... They're not like neutral enough. They're a little too saturated and like summertime bright greens compared to these like neutral natural greens. We've got like two different paintings going on here. But there's no problem because gouache, like we were saying, you can just paint over it. Okay, so let's see, how does this color look? Yeah, so I'm just gonna bring in some browns up here. Just bring in some colors from the lower part of the scene. Get some more unity with these colors. I'm looking at the time. I'm getting close to the time when I have to end stream, but we still have a few more minutes. I was hoping that I would maybe be able to finish this one, but then when we went for the larger paper, I was like, oh, maybe not. But we got pretty far. I have to get used to painting at a little bit of a bigger size and sort of scaling up what I do. I do want to be able to detail some areas more, but for the most part, my goal is to sort of, I don't know, maybe I need to just think about my brushwork a little bit and kind of scale that up, because I enjoy my smaller paintings, and I just feel like it would be nice to scale them rather than having to spend like twice the amount of time. Larger brushes make a difference. Yeah, I need to like restrict myself. I need to only bring certain brushes over here. I don't think there's a whole second stream's worth of painting here, so what I might do is finish it off stream and, you know, maybe just record it if I can. I'll see about that. I'll try to do that. Thanks everybody, I really appreciate you. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time, and I'll also see you in the Discord in the meantime. Yeah, you can always find me there. All right. Thank you, Bruce. Thanks for nice comments, everybody. Take care. See you next time. Bye. Bye.